Welcome to the A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal podcast, where each week I, Dr. Mal, share life lessons and motivation to kickstart your Monday. Whether you're starting your day or winding down, join me or me and my future guest for a burst of positivity and a fresh perspective. Let's make Mondays meaningful together. Greetings and happy Monday, everyone. I'm your host, Dr. Mallory D. McCoy, and welcome to this week's episode of A Monday Moment with Dr. Mal. As always, may this broadcast bring you what you need in the present moment. May my light exude positivity and kindness, and may my love be extended to all who could use a little extra. Ashe. Let's seize the moment. Hello, everyone. This week, I'm most grateful for the people chiming in with me on my Meditate at 8 for 8 sessions on my social media pages. Y'all, there's so much going on right now that I felt led to counteract the negativity with the positivity, the chaos with the calm, and the darkness with the light. My intention is to have everyone collectively gather to pause, breathe, and tap into the collective consciousness to foster peace, balance, and positive energy. So I'd be honored if you joined me. You can catch me at When Mallory Lives on my Facebook pages, my YouTube channel, or my LinkedIn page at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time every evening for 8 minutes until November 4th, 2024. I'm also incredibly grateful this week for others who see me bigger than I see myself. It's so beautiful to have others cheering you on for your success. And if you've been around me at all, you know that that is my field house too. I love to cheer other people on and to lift people up. And so when you receive what you give, it's just a beautiful, beautiful exchange of amazingness. And I'm so thankful to have an awesome cheering squad. And for me, I love to celebrate every part of life. And so I'm thankful to have a handful of people that I can do that with. I can just call them or text them and say, hey, this is what's good that's happening in my life, and not be intimidated by the good that's happening in my life, but celebrate me and I get to celebrate them. So I also want to take this very moment to give a special shout out to Gigi Jones, also known as Gigi the Vegan, for always encouraging me and lifting me up. We've connected before, but it was just like in passing. But this year we've actually built a relationship, and I'm thankful to have her in my life just as an older woman that I get to talk to and that's on a similar vibration as me, because plant-based living healed her and plant-based living healed me. And so just being able to share in that space with her is just incredible and has been incredible. She's such a joy to be around, and she's always encouraging and lifting people up. And so I just love that. Every year she hosts the Midwest Soul Veg Fest here in Kansas City. And this year I've been honored to help out with that. And she asked me to even speak at her event, which is crazy. And it was a blast. So through her, I've met so many amazing people, and I've expanded my network with love. And so I just wanted to publicly share that how grateful I am for her presence in my life. I'm forever grateful for continued blessings. My business partner and I just found out that we will now be presenting at Amplify KC, which is an educators conference for Black and Brown educators. And I'm so excited because our business that we created together is for Kansas City people first, because that's where we are. And so to be able to share our brand with Kansas City is just wonderful. And to share our ideas with fellow educators is even more wonderful. And I love the Amplify conference because it just, to have a counter space for Black and Brown educators is something that I've dreamed of. And there's been action-oriented people in the past who have created these things, but this one is a constant. And it brings everybody, not just in one district, but from all over into a space. And they're literally breaking down the doors to get there. So really excited about presenting at the Amplified KC conference and presenting at the National Alliance for Black School Educators Conference in Atlanta, both in November. So we're excited about that. And then I just found out that I was nominated and chosen to be an honoree for a local breakfast that's put on every year through Suburban Balance called Lift Her Up Conference. That will be happening next March 2025. And so I'm really excited about that and just honored. It's such a gift for people to see you in a capacity different than how you may see yourself, or just affirm you in a space that you should be affirmed in. So I'm excited about that. Today's show is titled, Let's Talk About Death, Baby. And I was real intentional about that. This is number 1 of 4 different shows exploring different sides of death. So by now, you know I love me a good definition, and I'm team facts over feelings. So let's get to the facts of it all. According to dictionary.com, death means the end of life or the act of dying. The Uniform Determination of Death Act, which is actually a legislation adopted by most states, says that a person is considered dead if there is either irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions or irreversible cessation of all brain functions, including the brainstem. This means a person must be completely brain dead for their breathing and circulation to stop. This distinction is crucial as there are instances where a person's heart and lungs may still be functioning while the brain is not. In such cases, the body's cells can remain alive due to an ongoing oxygen supply. Physicians may maintain this state if the individual has agreed to organ donation. Once the heart ceases to pump blood and breathing stops, cells will begin to die within minutes due to the lack of oxygen and nutrients. At this point, the body will actually go through a 4-stage post-mortem process, which includes the following stages: pallor mortis, where the skin pales due to the blood pooling; algor mortis, where the body cools over time; rigor mortis, where the muscles stiffen and contract; and livor mortis, where the areas of pooled blood begin to take on a bruise-like discoloration. Then there's another 4 steps for the decomposition process that the body goes through after the post-mortem process. And then here's some other facts, random facts about death that I didn't know before I went looking for them. Did you know that the study of death is called thanatology? And the word Thanos is derived from that and means death. Okay, I was shooketh because I am a Marvel fan and I never made 2 + 2 = 4. So anyway, Thanos actually means death, and it comes from thanatology, which is the study of death. So go figure. Number 2, you can be declared dead in some states, but considered alive in others. So that legislation that I've read to you that's adopted by most states is not adopted by all states. 2 states, specifically New York and New Jersey, allow families to reject the concept of brain death if it goes against their religious beliefs. I found that to be very interesting. Number 3, eyes reveal one of the first signs of death. So one of the first visible indicators of death is when the eyes cloud over as fluid and oxygen stop flowing to the corneas. That can happen within 10 minutes after death if the eyes were open, and 24 hours if the eyes were closed. Found that to be interesting. Number 4, human composting is legal in several states. The states actually: Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Colorado, Vermont, and New York. So basically, bodies decompose in dirt in reusable recomposition vessels, and the results don't smell, and it's suitable for use in the garden. And I just posted about this the other day because this is actually what I want to happen to I don't want to be in a coffin. Please don't put, look, all my family, all the people that's near me, don't put me in a coffin. Like, put me back in the earth and let me decompose and let me go, help other things to grow. That's the circle of life. That's what we're supposed to do. And then I found this to be interesting. So rigor mortis is when the body stiffens, but it's only a temporary part of the death process. And it usually goes away after a day or two after these certain fibers in muscle cells break down. And so how long it lasts depends on the temperature and the environment and among other factors. So anyway, that brings me to the topic of the week. And I want you to know that this is a sensitive topic, but I also want you to know that I'm talking about it from a sensitive way. I intend to be sensitive, but I also intend to be practical. So I'm moving into the practical, logical part that's not attached to the emotion. So what are we talking about here? For this week's episode, I chose to talk about death in the sense of the transition of a soul from a fresh fleshly frame, physical body, into the unknown. The reason why I thought it important to speak on the topic is because I yearn for the day that we can collectively speak about and prepare for death. Because I know, and also because I know why we don't want to speak about it. And it's because with death of anything comes grief, and grief doesn't feel good. And it's not an emotion that we actually learn how to process or even talk about learning how to process. Any event can trigger grief and can bring emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual pain. And no matter the event, it all feels the same. The familiarity you seek to grasp is no longer in your reach, and losing someone or something you love throws your body into a survival mode, and your nervous system struggles to regulate. Yeah, I'm speaking about this because I speak from direct experience. And these experiences that I've had with death of someone close to me has actually shaped how I view death and life. So I'd like to take a second and talk about those instances in my life that have helped to shape my view about this very important topic. So my first recalled experience with death, or with the grief of death and death, actually came on Christmas Day, 1992, with our family dog Trouble. On Christmas Eve, I remember him coming home from one of our neighborhood excursions. He was a neighborhood dog. He liked to be outside, but he also stayed inside. But when he was outside, like, he was unleashed, and the neighbors basically knew who he was. I remember him coming home from one of his neighborhood excursions, and I remember him being very weak, and blood was coming out of his mouth. And he was trying to get up the porch stairs to get into the house, but he did not have the body strength to make it. And I remember my dad rushing him to the animal hospital, and we barely got to say goodbye because it all happened so fast. And then he died the next morning. And I remember being so sad. But even in my 8-year-old mind, I didn't quite grasp my feelings. I didn't know where to place them. I just remember being sad. And the adults around me, they were sad too, but they couldn't explain it to me because they weren't dealing with their grief properly. They were using the tools that they had always relied on to deal with grief. And the tool that my grandmother used was alcohol. And so she was numb and couldn't talk about it. And the tool that my dad used, another adult in our house, was working. And so he couldn't talk about it. And I remember my sister and I, we actually relied on each other to console each other, but we didn't know how to necessarily help each other through that. It was just kind of like a blind navigation. And then the next grieving experience I remember was when I was in high school and my grandmother actually passed away, the one who raised me. And even though we didn't really get along, I loved her enough to be torn up about it. But by that point, I had learned how to cope with big feelings such as grief through defense mechanisms such as deflection, repression, and other coping mechanisms like sexual promiscuity that were disrespectful to my body. Oh, that's my truth. And to this day, I'm incredibly grateful to the Source Creator for carrying me safely through that time. I've always had guardian angels around me, and man, they carried me through a lot. So I'm grateful for that because I was out. I was wild out here. Despite the heaviness of loss from losing others around me, I could at least deduce that because they were older and had lived a full life, it was their time to transition. So imagine the shock of grief I experienced when my 20-year-old college boyfriend died during a sickle cell crisis in November 2004. Even though our relationship was only 9 months long, because of the pure enamor we had for each other, we spent a lot of time together. I took him to a hospital on Monday and he died on a Saturday. And that Saturday morning, I remember walking down the hospital hallway to the nurse's station that I'd visited before earlier that week. And they told me that he was moved to a different floor. So I got back on the elevator and I went to the floor that they told me that he was on. And as I'm walking down the hallway, I don't remember feeling anything. I remember feeling not anything negative. I was excited to see him because I had just started a job at Price Chopper and I'd worked the past couple of nights, so I couldn't go and see him. And so, but I talked to him on the phone. And anyway, I remember walking down the hallway and I see his brother come out of the room with tears in his eyes. It was like a waiting room. And then when I looked in the room, I see his other brothers surrounding his mom, and his mom is just yelling at me, "He's gone, Mallory, he's gone, he's gone." And I can remember myself dropping straight to the floor. And I was having a screaming fit. I don't remember how bad it was, but I know it was bad enough for the nurses to threaten to sedate me if I, couldn't get it together and calm down. And at that time, this is 2004, so cell phones were the absolute basic. Hell, I still had a landline and an answer machine in my apartment. And he had left multiple messages on my landline that Thursday, or my answer machine that Thursday, that I heard, but I wasn't able to, when I called him, he was sleeping and stuff like that. So anyway, I remember having to use my daytime cell phone minutes to call St. Louis to tell them what happened. And it was my mom, my sister, and my niece's dad that sprung into action. They said, "We're coming to get you." I knew that it would take them 4 hours to get to Kansas City. So in the meantime, I was just at the hospital because I was not in any condition to do anything else. And actually, the nursing staff wasn't going to let me do anything else. I remember finally, after I've, escaped my grief for a second, I remember asking, "Can I go see him?" And they told me that I wasn't going to be able to see him if I couldn't calm down. And so I calmed myself down enough to go see him. And I actually realized then that I was on the ICU floor. I remember them leading me into the room, and I remember what the body looks like. I can see the body right now as I'm talking to you. And there was like blood coming out of his nose and it dried up on his body. And I just remember slowly walking over to him and laying my head on his chest. And by that time, his body was cold. And I just left a river of tears on his chest. And I probably was there, it felt like seconds, but I was there a couple of hours, because I remember the nurses coming to check in on me to see if I was okay, but I just couldn't move. And so ultimately, somebody had to pry me off of him. And then I went and sat with his family until my family arrived. And you know that feeling that you have when you try to cry, you can't cry anymore. Like there's nothing that will come out. And I just remember having that, and I was numb all over. And I can't tell you what happened in between the time that my family got me from the hospital to the funeral, because my body won't let me remember. I remember some things. I remember sleeping next to my mom and her holding me, because every time I woke up, I would cry. And so I remember that, but I don't remember how I ate. I don't remember how I got to St. Louis. I don't remember anything. And my body to this day, 20 years later, because in November it's 20 years, my body still protects me from that. It won't allow me to remember. And the pain and trauma never stopped right there. The next thing I remember, I'm at his funeral and I make a speech and I get up and I talk through my grief, through my pain to the people there. I was just led to do that. And I remember writing something in a notebook. So I didn't, I would now type it out, but I wrote out what I was going to say about him, and I still have it. I still have a box of memories in my attic. I've since married. I've since had a child. It's 20 years later. And sometimes, a lot of times, I still think about him. And, I know where he's buried. It's like 30 minutes from my house, or maybe like 20 minutes from my house. And I've visited his grave, several times. 20 years later, I still grieve. And it doesn't it the grief, it doesn't get easier, but it is easier, because now I'm able to, it's 20 years later and I'm able to speak about it without crying. So that's a grief that has gotten easier as time has gone on. But after his death, I experienced other significant deaths in my life, but his death challenged my thought process about death and for the rest of my life. And actually thinking about his death and even what happened after his death helped me through a recent family tragedy that we had with my aunt being murdered in her home. And I actually spoke about her untimely transition on episode 12. And you can find that on my YouTube channel if you're interested in hearing my thoughts about that. And if you made it this far, thank you for letting me move through those stories, because I needed to release that. And especially on the impeding 20-year anniversary of his passing. He equals Babajide Solano Shikoni. He is Nigerian. And so thank you. Why am I talking about my grief in such a public way? Well, for me, lived experience is the best teacher. So I want to make clear that I'm not talking about something I don't know about. Second, I feel like with anything that we are ignorant about, there's a childlike fear and cowardice that accompanies the ignorance. So with death, I feel like the more we choose to learn about death and even seek to understand what happens in the death process and beyond, the easier it can be for us to move through the grief that death brings when anything you love transitions its energy beyond the physical realm. So, my call to action to you today and this week is to have more conversations about death and the grieving process. I'm not suggesting that we get comfortable with the death of someone we love, because we will never be comfortable with that. It just hurts too much. It hurts. And I'll be the first to say that I'm not comfortable with the idea of death, so much so that I don't even eat meat anymore because I can't live with the fact or even mentally and emotionally justify that something had to die for me to eat it to live. I will not comply or continue to comply with a cognitive dissonance that goes on with that just for that reason. But I do think we should get comfortable with the topic of death because it's a part of living. And ultimately, when we agree to live, we agree to die. Just as when we agree to any part of any duality, we automatically agree to the other part and the spectrum in between. For example, when we agree to love, we accept the pain that comes with loving. When we agree to safety, we also accept that danger may come with that. And in the darkest of nights, there's always light. Even the fact that I love facts means that I still have to accept that the facts may be laced with untruths and monoperspective truths. And the one that we're talking about today, to be absent from the body is to be free in spirit. And we shouldn't refrain from talking about grief because learning how to process grief should become a normal thing, just as it should become a normal thing to feel feelings and be vulnerable. So many people hold on to grief and it just makes them sick without realizing that speaking about your grief and moving through those emotions of grief and continuing to honor the soul you're grieving actually keeps who and what you're grieving alive in your heart and you alive by moving around the heavy energy that can store itself in the body as dis-ease or illness. Yes, holding on to emotions can literally make you sick. I think it's important to know what steps anyone needs to take before you transition from this life. Your family and friends should only have to mourn your passing, not be worried about what to do with your earthly possessions after you transition. So the first thing we should all do to get comfortable with death is to bathe in gratitude for the life we get to live and live life to the fullest every nanosecond of every day. I know it sounds ironic for me to say that the way we get comfortable with death is to get comfortable with life, but there are a lot of people living their lives in apprehension and fear. What would you do if you knew your last hour was coming? Would you live in the present moment any different? If so, then start living like that. Also, treat yourself with kindness, compassion, love, empathy, and care so you can learn how to treat others like you treat yourself. You never know what someone is going through, and how you treat them just might be the catalyst that changes their whole life trajectory. Next, find an estate lawyer to speak with about getting your paperwork in place. If you have anything attached to your social security number, assets, children, etc., you need the following documents at the very least. You need a living will, you need an advanced healthcare directive, and a durable and or medical power of attorney. And if you have assets such as a house, then you need a beneficiary deed. If you have children, you need to designate who they'll be with in the event of your transition while still in your primary care. My mom was blown when I was speaking to this special needs trust lawyer, and she was saying that my son would have to go to foster care before going with family if my partner and I died without any designated place for him to go. That devastates me to think about. And so getting my paperwork together is on my near future priority list. Start planning what you'd like to happen with your body after you transition. A lot of people opt for funerals, but there are some who don't desire to have a funeral. Pick me. I don't want a funeral. I want an all-white party. I'm going to start creating a life slideshow that I want to be played at this party, and I want my body to be buried under a tree with no casket, because caskets are littering our earth. They're the litter of the earth. And so don't put me in a casket. Let me compost and use my body as nutrients to grow other life here on earth. Have all of these death and dying conversations with your family, no matter how uncomfortable it is, so that they know what to do for you, so that you have agency over yourself as you're dying or post-mortem. One conversation that's a huge conversation to have is what you desire to be done medically for you if you can't make medical decisions for yourself. That's what the advanced healthcare directive is for. But sometimes those papers are not in place when your decisions are needing to be made for you. Do you want your family member to keep you on life support for as long as the doctors deem necessary? Do you want to undergo any life-saving measures, no matter if it reduces your quality of life? If you know that the people close to you don't know the answers to these questions, then you need to have a conversation with them. And like I said earlier, it's much easier to move through these situations when you don't have to think about making hard decisions too. And if you've already made these decisions for yourself, then your family will have to honor those decisions. They'll have no choice because it says it on the paperwork. And if you feel like you can't have conversations like this with your family, there are death conversations happening in the community. For example, a couple of weeks ago, I just went to a local death cafe, which was hosted at the public library, the KC Mo Public Library. It's a space where people get together and they talk about death and dying with no judgment, and all are welcome to talk about it. And the death cafe that I attended was intimate, as there were only 4 other people there. And we talked about so many different things, and we talked about it objectively. It was not a grief counseling session, because that's not what that's for. I'm sure there's groups for grief counseling, but death cafes are just for death and dying. And it was great. Some people just find comfort in speaking with others who have no personal investments in their lives. Ask me how I know, because I get life stories just by existing everywhere that I go. And it's an honor when people tell me things, but also it can be weighty too. That's a hard burden to carry for a person who just has an energy of, let me tell you my whole life. I'm like, but I'm dealing with my own stuff. Anyway, you know what has actually helped me to get more comfortable talking about death is listening to others speak about their near-death experiences. So, near-death experiences, also known as NDEs, are experiences people have when they die and come back to life. And they detail what happens or what they can remember as their soul left their body and came back. And I have watched and listened to so many people bravely speak about their NDE, and I am captured by the beauty that they describe of being in spirit form and the love that they experience that they've not felt in this earthly realm at all. Most of them talk about this in such great detail. It's like this love that they can't ever feel here. And I'm highly intrigued by that. And I'm, as a lover of love, I'm like, I want to feel that love. And what's even more intriguing to me is that their spirits can be aware of what they are leaving behind, whether it be children, whether it be, family, like husband, stuff like that. But sometimes they say like, it doesn't matter because they experience so much love that they don't want to come back. And personally, I have not had an NDE experience, so I live to hear the stories of others and how it has changed their lives for the better. And if you're interested, I would suggest you look up NDEs on YouTube and set aside some time to binge watch because they're so intriguing, you might not want to stop watching them. And then one last thought about this. I know I'm long-winded with this, but very important topic. You know what I've been thinking? Why is it not a customary practice for anybody, anywhere, to get some sort of plan in place for death as soon as a person is born? We do so many things as soon as the baby is born, but we don't do that. We could just alleviate so many obstacles and we wouldn't have to think about death so hard when it came if we had something that was put in place when we were born. Is that too logical or practical? What are your thoughts about this? And if you have some thoughts, you can DM me or you can leave a comment and let me know. Well, that's really all the thoughts that I have for today, but I'm going to wrap it up, of course, as I do every solo episode with a quote, a couple of quotes, and a list of affirmations. So my first quote is from a poem from Langston Hughes. Life is for the living, death is for the dead. Let life be like music and a death a note unsaid. You know, I love that because it has something to do with music, and we're talking about living in death. So that was perfect. And then this one hit me with its best shot as a recovering people pleaser, because we do spend too much time living for other people, and we don't spend enough time living for ourselves. So it says, it is not the end of the physical body that should worry us. Rather, our concern must be to live while we're alive, to release our inner selves from the spiritual death that comes with living behind a facade designed to conform to external definitions of who and what we are. What a miserable life it is to live how you think someone else wants you to live and not live how you need to live for you. It's wild. And then I actually was reading a blog about death conscious affirmations. Who knew that was such a thing? Anyway, 10 affirmations for death conscious thinking include the following. When I contemplate my own death, I find more gratitude for this life. I may not know much about what happens after death, but I choose to stay open to this next great adventure. When I accept that death is a necessary part of life, I feel at peace with my spirit. Death's permanence teaches me that the fleeting moments of life are gifts I choose to deeply cherish. I love that one. Life and death are a part of a cycle that exists in all things that are of the natural world, and I am a part of the natural world. Yes. If birth and death are inevitable, then I choose to be in complete acceptance of these cycles that are life. I see death as a raindrop returning to the ocean. And this is actually an affirmation inspired by the poem Call Me by My True Name by Thich Nhat Hanh. I may die one day, but right now I am alive. And I choose to live fully by being fully here now. I love that one. By planning for my own mortality, I liberate myself. Yeah. And then lastly, when I leave this earth, the love I leave behind will remain. Absolutely. Yeah, times 10. So that's it for me this week. Thank you for tuning into a Monday Moment with Dr. Mal, now proudly a part of the Alive Podcast Network. You can find this show on the Alive Podcast Network website and app, and you can find this podcast streaming across your favorite podcast streaming platforms and on my YouTube channel, When Mallory Lives. And I can't wait for you to hear next week's episode. I will speak about my personal experience with the other side, aka spirit, throughout my whole life. And I also had the honor and privilege of interviewing Jamie Collins, a Kansas City area psychic medium who makes it her business to speak to the other side for a living. And I can tell you that I've personally had 2 readings with her, and these 2 readings changed my whole life trajectory for the better. And I just cannot tell you how amazing she is, and I can't tell you how excited I was. I was fangirling the whole time. And is it next week yet? Because I can't wait for you to hear it. Anyway, until then, love and peace to all of you. Have the best week. Thank you.